Hello, everybody. What's up, party people? Hopefully you can see me okay. I'm a little bit washed out by the sun, but that said, as long as you can see my screen that I'm sharing, then we should be all good. I am super excited to kick off the Japanese forms portion of the course. I think that these are really fun because they tend to go against our westernized tendencies. And what I mean by that before I jump into the Zuihitsu is essentially that you'll notice part of the westernized experience. And this is in terms of not just our expectations and our aesthetics for poetry, but for art, for movies, for everything. We want closure. We want symmetry. We want things to balance. We want things to come full circle. We want a cohesive narrative, all those things. So the cool thing about Japanese forms is that they take those westernized notions of sort of like a holistic nature and patterns, and they crack it wide open. So that said, welcome to the Zuihitsu. I'm going to turn around so that you can see my face a bit more because I see that it's washed out. So anyway, yes, the Zuihitsu is super cool. And here's why. The Zuihitsu is like, so it originated somewhere around 1100 BC, but it was truly flash fiction meets lyrical essays, meets microfiction, all of those. It was essentially genre complete disruption before even it was a thing. So the Zuihitsu is a Japanese genre of fragmented, formless essays. It can either be in a series of paragraphs or it can be kind of like one paragraph. It deals with one's surroundings. It's a series, or it can be a series that can be loosely connected overall in theme. There are casual observations about your surroundings and also a casual tone. It is really, really fun with Zuihitsus to be kind of snarky or playful. And I think that you'll find when you're making these kind of observations and using humor that for at least me, a totally new kind of like deliciously bitchy, snarky voice emerged in my work, which I really enjoyed. The thing to realize about the Zuihitsu is that when it concludes, it trails off into nowhere. There isn't a perfect conclusion. There isn't a bow on it. There isn't an ending. Like even like look at the 5-paragraph essay that we were taught to write, right? Like we are always taught to seek wrapping up conclusion. And so the Zuihitsu kind of like it's a formless form. It ends in kind of nothing. There doesn't have to, and there shouldn't be a major overarching point. And so, like I said, you're going to be working against your Western idealization of form needing to circle back, contain resolution, or conclude neatly. There's no central point, and that's also going to be super weird and fun. Some parts of the Zuihitsu can even be in verse. The ideas kind of jump from one idea to the next. And it defies categorization, which is one of the things that I think is so cool about this genre, is that it's a genre without a genre, one which to this day, Western culture isn't yet 100% ready for, as much as people are doing more like lyrical essays and blending genres and stuff like that. It's still truly our westernized minds want to contain things so much. And we want to be able to say, this is a poem, this is not, this is what this does. And the beauty of the Zuihitsu is that it says, this is what I do. And so it emerged during the Heian period. So that's 795 to 1185 BC. And the person who coined the Zuihitsu is absolutely fascinating. Her name is Shay Shonigan. And she at the time was a member of the imperial court. So she published the Pillow Book, and it had Zuihitsus, and it also had list poems. She was a huge fan of the list also. She would make really like funny, catty observations in the Zuihitsus and lists. She really, really did not have any tolerance for slovenliness or most people for that matter. And what's really fascinating is that, yes, she wrote this entire book called The Pillow Book, which you can get. And She was extremely prolific during her time, but then she kind of dropped off the face of the earth. And it is speculated that she went on to become a Buddhist monk, which is hilarious because she so grew up during a time in that period where aesthetics, beauty, and single-mindedness, like those were integral to the culture, like this idea of aesthetics, this idea of like delicacy, this idea of elegance. But the thing is about somebody like that who lives in that kind of empire is that that level of standards you can't always maintain it realistically. So I thought I would throw in that part. I think it's really fascinating that she went off to become a monk, that something in her, along with the culture at that time, switched in their idealizations, which is a whole other history lesson, but I wanted to tell you about that. Often the Zuihitsu is rooted in Buddhist thought. It can, but it doesn't have to reflect Japanese themes, including a change of seasons. And it explores attitudes pervasive to our culture. So you'll see the Zuihitsus in this week's reading. And I also gave you a couple of my own fun fact. I wrote these when I was taking a class with Kimiko Han, it was titled Japanese Forms to Tilt the Western Mind. And I got really obsessed with Zuihitsus, but I also, as I was reading these poems, and this was about in 2010, I was selling sunglasses full-time in Provincetown, Massachusetts. I'm sure a lot of you know this story. And it was like just one of the craziest freaking places ever. And on top of it, I was in the process of taking an online community college class. I was applying to grad schools. I was working 45 plus hours a week, and I was taking this class with Kimiko. And I was also running an 102-degree fever, and I had multiple infections in my ears, nose, and throat. So fun fact, I'm being very vulnerable with you here. I'm going to show you one of my Zuihitsus I read while under the influence of severe overwork and stress, and one of many illnesses and breakdowns that were kind of characteristic of my life at the time. And I would love to tell you that this Zuihitsu isn't based on a true story, but it is. So often what Shei Shonagon would do is she would write notes. They were notes. You can also title your Zuihitsu, but she would, as you'll notice, she would write notes as kind of a declarative colon, and then she would just go into it. So notice how I'm going to kind of go into nothing. I'm making observations, but there's not like a huge conclusion, and I'm staying with the concrete, and it's kind of snarky. Notes. The decidedly deranged man who's been arrested multiple times for assaulting people on the street has gone off his meds again. He swathes his head in a bedsheet turban and wraps his comforter around him. Truly, he must live in a glorious ashram. He comes into my sunglass store and tries on the most expensive women's Bulgaris with the rhinestone encrusted temple. He asked me if he is pretty. It is not a question. So that really happened. And I remember writing this and Kimiko saying, because I tried to kind of wrap up the poem in a metaphor, and I tried to conclude so that, just to make it pretty, to make it symmetrical. And she said, no, like, just end it. He asked me if he's pretty. It's not a question, just end there. So end at the weird part, and where there's like a totally strange, bizarre cliffhanger. And if you look at the Jenny Z Zuihitsu, you'll see that she does multiple paragraphs, but she's also making really concrete observations that kind of just trail off. So you can also use different fragmentations, like different fragmented observations throughout one poem too. I stuck with the observation of that guy who is absolutely like just crazy, and I was afraid of him and running a fever. But with her, she chooses different fragmentations of several different observations. So just to go through the first few paragraphs. Sunday, awake with this headache. I pull apart the evening with a fork, white clot behind the eyes. Someone once told me before and after is just another false binary, the warmed over bones of January. I had no passport. Beneath the stove, 2 mice made a paradise out of a button of peanut butter. And so you can see that each part, each paragraph has its own freestanding fragmented unit. And the very last paragraph is, and it gives you this example of kind of the formless form. When I was 4, I ate spoonfuls of powdered milk straight from the canister. The powder was sweet. There wasn't enough money for fresh milk. 700 years ago, Chang Yao Yang Hao wrote, "All my life seems like yesterday morning." So it's kind of cool because she actually does do a Western thing where she circles back to Sunday and awake. But I would argue that a true Zuihitsu would even, so in a way it's fragmented though, because there isn't a linear narrative throughout, but she does kind of circle back. What I would challenge you to do is to try and stay as uncircly, I just made that a word, and fragmented as possible. I want you to have fun with this, like make these observations, break out of the linear narrative, the 5-paragraph essay, the urge for resolution, and stick with making these different observations, play with tone. Like I said, it's a great way to like also have to project that sardonic kind of catty tone too. And I absolutely, I love this form because it's challenging because it doesn't have a form. So it's my sincere hope that you guys have a blast with this very formless form. So your challenge as among one of the Japanese forms this week, and I think, are we also doing guzzles? As anyway, so you'll be able to choose from the different forms. No, we're doing all Japanese forms. So you can choose either this one, a haibun, or a haiku. And I think that you'll really have a lot of fun with it. I mean, I hope you do. I don't know. I have a student from my poetry class I taught at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. And it's really funny because like to this day, she still brings up the Japanese forms unit. And she's like, I hated it. And I'm like, you're supposed to. It's not how the Western mind works, damn it. But you make your own decisions. I hope you love it. Have an amazing week. And I'm super excited to see what you guys come up with. Take care and peace out.